I don't know that actually I saw it as a challenge. It was a facilitation of groups, really, of people. What sticks out in my memory more than anything else is the openness that people had. We had direct competitors talking to each other, opening their books, saying, this is how we do this thing. We created DSDM totally collaboratively, totally cooperatively, completely in line with all the best principles of rapid application development or agile or whatever you want to call it, whatever label you give it. It's about people working together in an open way and communicating effectively all the time. We had really a huge following by the time we got to the end of the first year, but we started off with a small elite group, if you like, very select, which had been pulled together of people who worked in their own organizations in what is now called agile systems development. We had people from Allied Domec, British Airways, American Express, from the sort of the user side. We had from the vendor side big organizations like Oracle and IBM, and the company that I worked for, which was Logica. And we also had CMG, and at the time Logica and CMG were absolutely face-on, head-to-head competitors for anything significant to do in terms of systems development in defence, government, all sorts of areas. But for this purpose, we just got together and we talked. I was a process designer for Logica. We had a small team of 3 or 4 people who designed processes for use in Logica projects across the world. And I was the one that had designed the agile process for Logica projects. And my compatriot, if you like, from CMG, George Hay, had done a similar job in CMG. And we actually completely opened our books, which were really IPR for the companies that we worked for, and and would normally never ever have been shared. But this was just one example. So clearly people from British Airways didn't feel threatened by somebody from Allied Domec, which doesn't exist anymore, but was a big drinks manufacturer, just so you know. And they didn't feel challenged by people from American Express, so they were perfectly able to share. It was the vendors that was absolutely stupendous, because they had the breadth and depth of experience, and everything that went into DSDM, we put together a very initial architecture for the thing in the first month of 1994. And that architecture has remained ever since. It had the phases and the key products and the key roles. They were all sort of understood at that point. And the layers underneath that we needed to think about: how to do risk management, how to do quality management, how to do all sorts of things. Anyway, every single thing that we put into DSDM throughout the next year had already been tried and tested by one or more of the organizations. It was something that they were doing. So we knew that we were doing something which wasn't completely off the wall. It wasn't totally fabricated out of some wonderful guru's brain. It was all good practice. So we had the technical work group, which had a membership of about 6 or 7 people. Each one of those had a work group underneath them, and they would bring together their topics. So we would have open meetings where anybody could turn up who was a member of the consortium and head to one of the groups. There was one on processes, one on products, one on roles, one on tools and techniques, and all the rest, one on the controls, the things that DSDM has actually proven its great strength in, things like risk management and quality management and all the rest of it. And then they would contribute to that, and the technical work group would be the leads of those, and then they would come back and we would then sort of put together what we'd got out of that, and just the thing grew incrementally and iteratively, as it should do as a DSDM project. So by the end of the year, by the end of 94, we had something which was a cohesive whole, and I spent December really sort of putting it all together, making it into a common language and getting it out for review, so that people ruined their Christmas holidays by reviewing this lovely book. And then we had a public review, and nobody really came up with any major comments. So it was passed. And at that point we were ready to publish, and we had a big launch event at IBM in Feltham. I can't remember the name of the set of huge buildings, and it felt a little daunting, to be quite honest, but by that time we had, from our little core of enthusiasts at the beginning, we had well over 100 members, and each of those member organisations brought masses of people and friends and relations and all the rest of it, and it was a terrific event, and it was launched and it was out there. The only thing we needed to do before we totally were confident with what we had was to test it. So we set off 6 pilot projects for very different organisations, the Cooperative Bank, Boston Globe, and because they were rapid, fast projects, they were able to do the whole life cycle, front to back, all of them within 6 months, have something delivered and have got some real lessons learned, which were then fed back into the process, fed back into the method, and so we were able to do version 2, was then published in the September of '95, absolutely guaranteed to be a really good thing. It was going to work if you did it right, if you just didn't totally forget about it, which you can do. You can say, oh, we're doing DSDM, and you don't, but that's another story. Ooh, that's a tough one. It is, I think our key message all along was that it was a holistic approach. There had been, up to then, methods for project management, methods for analysis, methods for coding, methods for testing. What we did was we assumed that you knew how to do all of these things, but what you didn't know was how to apply them with an agile mindset. So we didn't say, you have to, for project management, you have to do all these things. You know how to do planning, but how are you going to plan when you've got something like a fixed deadline and flexible requirements, and you've got a fixed team and fixed cost and all these other things which you normally wouldn't plan for? So that we put in that change so that then people could bring their own methods, plug it in and make it work. At that time, for instance, Prince was pretty well established as the way government certainly did its projects. So we had to bear that in mind, and we had those sort of products and product descriptions that Prince people could pick up and go, yeah, that's fine. Because we were a UK-based organisation, we did have the grand idea that would go out and grab the world. And certainly, in the second year, we had really major organisations in the States seriously interested in it, people like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And we also very soon caught the attention of the Dutch, and they looked at it, and they are similar sort of methods people to the Brits, and they bought into it very quickly. As it's holistic, it has to have all the pieces. It has to have the management aspects, it has to have the system development aspects, it has to have the products that you make to control the management side, to control the development sides, and to actually create workable, usable systems, solutions, whatever it is, whether it's IT or business, it doesn't matter, you're creating something. So those are all there, and for that to work you have to have the processes that they follow, and you have to have the people to enact the processes. So we very early on had a view that we were pulling together people, process and technology and tools to make something which will drive you to deliver something on the day that it's required regardless, and that was our aim. And we had the hope that it would become a universal approach. It is growing and growing more and more. It dived down and now it's on the up again, and I hope that it just keeps on climbing again. I was working while we were doing the development as a project manager within the Department of Health for Logica, on behalf of Logica. And I tried out bits and pieces there just to see how they worked. But my first full-on DSDM project was again for Logica, but for Shell in Aberdeen, Shell Expro, Exploration and Production, I think Expro stands for. And we were putting together a really complicated system that would measure and monitor the flow of oil through the pipelines. I think that's what it did, but I may have got it wrong by now. And we had a Shell employee as the project manager and a Logica employee as the project manager. So we had joint cooperative project management. The software team were Logica people, and the Shell people were oil engineers, and it worked a dream. We actually did have totally flexible requirements, even though the chief oil engineer had said, I've written the thing in Excel, I don't need anything else. And he said it with a Scottish accent. Okay. And I've done this, we don't need this, it's a waste of time. And he was not going to be our best customer ever. But as he became more and more involved with it, by the end of the project, because he had had that constant presence and constant feedback and seeing what's going on, he would defend to the death the system that was produced by the end, which for me was such applauded. You know, it really was. And the Shell project manager swore that he was never ever going to do any other project, you know, than a DSDM one from there on in. Success. The way that it is different is that the method was originally predicated on the fact that if you did DSDM, you did DSDM in its entirety. You didn't really need anything else. You would pull in techniques from other methods, such as Prince or whatever, or your own testing approach, or your quality management approach. But what we have now is a more generic approach where you can actually plug in whole agile methods that very often do not address project management with the same rigor and depth that DSDM has and always has done. Yeah. Oh golly, I wish I knew the answer to that. Methods come and go, methods come and die. And the fact that this one is still plodding on 20 years on is really a testament to its stoicism more than anything else. It is definitely on an upward curve at the moment. Others, like Prince, have continued to grow in the same way, and I don't expect that anybody thought that they would still exist 5, 10 years down the line. 20, maybe it's got another 50 years in it, who knows? It could grow to being the approach to keeping agile businesses going. It is not, as it was originally, about IT systems, about software systems. It's about business systems, some of which may be IT-based, some of which may not. And I think that will be its strength. People will see, I've got to do this to stay in the market. I've got to do this to beat the competition. And they will take on the process and make it work for them. I actually was heavily involved, I suppose, for 11 years. And it was something of a sigh of relief when I left, because I thought, I don't have to do that anymore. But I think if I had the youth and vigour, yeah, I probably would, because it was an exciting challenge and it was fun. That's the key thing. It was absolute fun.